The Galactic Museum of Ancient Warfare stood as a monument to 10,000 civilizations' bloodiest achievements. Its crystalline spires pierced the clouds of New Centauri Prime, housing artifacts that had conquered worlds, toppled empires, and ended entire species. Among its countless treasures, none were more feared than the weapons of the predecessor wars, relics so dangerous that even touching their display cases required Level 9 clearance. Raza had neither clearance nor ambition. He simply needed the job. At 19, the young human janitor moved through the museum's corridors like a ghost, his cleaning cart's wheels squeaking against polished floors that reflected the soft glow of containment fields. The late-night shift suited him perfectly. No crowds of gawking tourists, no pompous Altarian curators looking down their triple nostrils at him. Just him and the ancient silence of dead warriors' tools. Another thrilling evening, he muttered to himself, spraying disinfectant on a display case housing a Krillian warhammer that had supposedly crushed the moons of Delek 7. The weapon lay dormant behind its energy barrier, its obsidian surface drinking in the museum's ambient light. 3 levels above, Dr. Naz Patel worked late in the xenoarchaeology wing, her dark eyes scanning holographic readouts of the museum's newest acquisition. The Blade of Vorthak had arrived just that morning from the restricted vaults of the hegemony's capital world, accompanied by warnings in 17 languages and a security detail that seemed genuinely terrified of their cargo. The weapon defied easy categorization. Part sword, part staff, part something else entirely. It measured exactly 2 meters in length and seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Its metal, if it was metal, showed no signs of corrosion despite being at least 50,000 years old. Most disturbing of all were the symbols etched along its surface, symbols that seemed to shift and writhe when observed directly. Naz rubbed her tired eyes and glanced at the time. Past midnight already. She'd been poring over the preliminary scans for hours, trying to understand why every other ancient weapon in the museum had begun exhibiting strange energy fluctuations the moment Vorthak's blade had been brought inside. The readings made no sense. It was as if the artifacts were responding to something. 4 floors below, Raza pushed his cart past the predecessor exhibit, humming an old Earth song his grandmother had taught him. He'd been born on one of humanity's newer colonies, but she'd insisted he learn the old ways, the old songs. "Never forget where you came from, Beta," she'd always said. "We humans, we carry our strength in our hearts, not our hands." The motion sensors activated as he approached, bathing the exhibit in soft blue light. Dozens of ancient weapons materialized behind their energy barriers. Swords that had cleaved battleships, spears that had pierced planetary shields, axes that had hewn paths through enemy fleets. The centerpiece was new, a strange blade that seemed to drink the light around it. Raza paused, studying the weapon with the casual interest of someone who'd seen thousands of similar artifacts. The placard was still being updated, showing only a catalog number and the ominous words, "Extreme caution, level 10 containment." He reached for his spray bottle and froze. The containment field around the blade was flickering, its normally steady hum becoming erratic. Warning lights began flashing amber around the display case's perimeter. Probably just another glitch, Raza muttered. But company policy was clear. Any containment anomaly had to be reported immediately. He reached for his comm unit, but as he did, his elbow knocked against the display case's emergency panel. The barrier winked out. For a heartbeat, the museum fell silent. Then every ancient weapon in the building began to scream. Not the sound of alarms or sirens, but actual screams. The voices of 10,000 warriors crying out across the void of time and space. The Krillian warhammer's obsidian surface blazed with inner fire. Altarian plasma lances hummed with deadly energy. Taraxian bone swords sang hymns of conquest in frequencies that made the museum structure groan. And they all pointed north. Every blade, every spear, every instrument of war swiveled in its housing to aim at the same spot. The predecessor exhibit where Raza stood frozen before the now exposed blade of Vorthak. The weapon rose from its pedestal without being touched, hovering in the air before him. The symbols along its length blazed with silver fire, and suddenly Raza could read them. Not with his eyes, but with something deeper, older. A racial memory that reached back to humanity's earliest days. "The king returns," the blade whispered in a voice like breaking worlds. "The inheritor has come." 4 floors up, Naz watched her instruments go insane as energy readings spiked beyond measurement. The building's quantum-locked security system registered impossible readings, gravitational anomalies, temporal fluctuations, and something the sensors could only classify as conceptual distortion. She ran for the emergency stairs, her heart pounding as the museum's structure sang around her like a struck bell. Through the windows, she could see the city's skyline changing as every weapon in New Centauri Prime, from police sidearms to orbital defense platforms, turned to point at the museum. Raza stared at the floating blade, his mind reeling as memories that weren't his own flooded through him. Images of humanity's forgotten past, of the time before the colonies, before the expansion into space. A time when humans had been something more than clever primates with delusions of grandeur. The predecessors hadn't been aliens, they'd been human. The first humans, the ones who'd spread across the galaxy millions of years before recorded history. They'd built wonders and fought wars on a scale that made modern conflicts look like children's games. And when they'd finally fallen, they'd hidden their greatest weapons, waiting for the day when their descendants would be ready to reclaim their birthright. "You are not ready," the blade said, its voice now gentle, almost sad. "But you are needed." The weapon settled into Raza's palm with a sound like coming home. The moment his skin touched its surface, the screaming stopped. The other weapons fell silent, but they remained pointed at him, waiting. Nas burst into the exhibit hall to find Raza standing in a circle of silver fire, the impossible blade cradled in his hands like a newborn. His eyes met hers across the space between them, and she saw something there that made her blood run cold. The weight of eons, the patience of stone, the terrible responsibility of inheritance. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, his voice carrying harmonics that hadn't existed moments before. "I never meant for this to happen." Outside, across the galaxy, ancient vaults began opening. Weapons that had slept for millennia stirred to life, and on 1,000 worlds, humans felt something stir in their blood, a call to arms that reached back to the very beginning of their species. The Janitor King had awakened, and the galaxy would never be the same.